Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere mai, and welcome to this week's episode of the Nishkash Variety Show, where we dive into a aquatic park wildcard of Aotearoa sport. We got the slip and slide, we got the wave pool, we got the old sit on the donut and just flow around the river, the lazy river. You can do whatever you want in this aquatic park. It's a beautiful summertime-ish vibration of Aotearoa sport and wildcard, just to get the juices flowing. Doing a couple of laps of the swimming pool. Like, they've actually got the lanes out, doing some backstroke, just got to warm up, limber up before I charge up the stairs to the massive water slide of Aotearoa sport. We were both at the All Whites game at Eden Park, and I think before we've got a nice break from All Whites footy for a while. They won't play international games, especially in Aotearoa, for a while. And I think this is a good opportunity for Kiwi football fans to come up with something better than what I saw at Eden Park, where you had little pockets of fans, one group of mates over there, then you had a block of fans, hearty fans, and they're all singing different songs. They've all got different chants, let alone how Kiwi a lot of those chants are, quite tame.
All Whites, clap, clap, clap.
Exactly. And I'm thinking the next time the All Whites play in Aotearoa, there needs to be some, football fans are freaky about their sport. They love football, and they are big-time football fans. And and they all watch football overseas, so they all know the vibe. And I think there should be some sort of cohesive orchestra for Kiwi football fans. Orchestra is, I don't mean instrumentation necessarily, but, chanting and singing. And I don't know, you should have 4 or 5 national football chants and songs for the All Whites and the football fans, so that anytime you go to a New Zealand football game, considering what football fans like about the football experience, there should be 4 or 5 songs that everyone knows the words to, they know the actions, they're ready to go and make it a swashbuckling atmosphere. For example, you could do a bit of Kia kaha Aotearoa, Kia kaha Aotearoa, Kia kaha Aotearoa. Bit of that, something just everyone gets involved, because it was a bit sad looking around Eden Park. Everyone loves football, everyone loves Aotearoa, and they're just 5 guys are singing their own song, and then around the corner another 10 guys are doing their own song as well. I think the fans' performance was reflected in the players' performance, maybe.
The things I'll say, because I have seen a little bit of criticism elsewhere from just the lack of passion in the crowd or whatever. There's 2 things I will say. One, it's hard to expect orchestrated everybody singing off the same hymn sheet kind of fandom when this team hasn't even played at home for 5 years. If there were songs back then, no one can remember them. And then the other thing is there would have been more cheering and noise if the All Whites had actually scored some goals. They didn't have a whole lot to cheer for. There weren't even that many close chances, unfortunately. So there was a little bit of that. It wasn't the best. They weren't given the best opportunities. You said you didn't necessarily mean orchestration in terms of instruments and stuff. I do, because I think there's nothing cooler than the dude who plays the trumpet at the Barmy Army thing is always fun. But in football in particular, get the drums out, get the drums out, and then you can play football to a drum beat. That's cool as. I have seen it at times in rugby league games. I think they've done that at Warriors games before. And it's cool as. It gives you a bit of a rhythm to play with on the field, and then it's something to help stir the fans as well themselves. That kind of thing is cool as, because I don't necessarily know we're going to get Kiwi footy fans to sing for 90 minutes with a whole bunch of songs and stuff, the way that an English Premier League club or, even a team in South American Passion or something like that. On the one hand, we want those kind of atmospheres. On the other hand, we do need to find the thing that's our own, rather than just copy and pasting what other countries and fans and overseas do. So But I like the idea of getting some like throw away the loudspeaker that plays music and stuff during games. We don't need that. I don't think they bothered with that in the Always game. At least I can't remember it. But get like I don't know, get the closest school or whatever, get the cultural groups out with the drums or something like that, or get the jazz band out there and do that kind of thing. That's my suggestion anyway.
I think Kiwi football fans just need to come together and pick a few chants and songs and execute them to the best of their abilities, as opposed to it's very disjointed. And I just want people to come together under the Aotearoa flag and celebrate their sport, because it's far better than 50 different random groups doing their own thing, like we can do better. But as you said, it's got to be an Aotearoa flavor. That's why I went with the Kia Kaha Aotearoa. And when I was dancing, chanting that last night in my lounge, it was clap based. But then as I was doing it, I was like, Kia Kaha Aotearoa, boom, Kia Kaha Aotearoa, boom, like, get some bass in there, get some drums, make it a party. And this is the Variety Show. We're from the Niche Cage, theniche-cage.com. Big Aotearoa Sporting Yarns. The Wildcard has written about both All Whites games, both losses. The Wildcard has covered them in depth. I have written about Dylan Brown, James Fisher-Harris, ahead of the NRL Grand Final. Those type of yarns can be found on our website, theniche-cage.com, where we're always yarning about Aotearoa sport. We did record a Patreon podcast prior to the Variety Show where we broke down all things All White Socceroos, as well as just some Trans-Tasman vibes, and exploring how the different Aotearoa and Australia teams match up against each other. So check that out if you are a member of the Patreon whānau. Otherwise, Patreon's the best way to support us. Straight up the guts, patreon.com/EL Niche Cage. Best way to support the Niche Cage content. And of course, yesterday was Monday, which means we sent out I think that actually got sent out this morning, Tuesday morning I saw. A little bit of a midnight
dispatch. It was just after the midnight dispatch, just after because of daylight savings, Otherwise we would have snuck in at like 11:30 PM and it wouldn't have been a noticeable thing.
Every Monday and Friday evening, we send out the email dispatch with all the links to Niche Cage content, the website, the yarns, and the podcast, as well as extra information. I wrote about Lydia Ko, offered some rugby league thoughts as well. The Wildcard whipped up his Women's National League Team of the Week to go with some Joseph Parker and under-19 Oceania football champion Kōrero as well. So sign up to that via Substack, thenichecage.substack.com, and that goes straight into email inbox every Monday and Friday evening. Wildcard. Serve up the mindfulness. The mindfulness is like one of those mats you get at the water slides. And this is you're about to hand me the mindfulness mat, and I am going to sit on it and just slide down this glorious water slide. Parakai is what I'm thinking of. Parakai Hot Springs, one of the best water slides in Aotearoa.
There you go. Well, here's your water slide mat then, from the poet Muriel Rukeyser. I don't know how to say that, but she said, or she wrote rather, "The universe is not made of atoms; it's made of stories."
Do you want to?
It's a summary one.
I was thinking, like, I can see how the atoms become the stories, and the atoms come together in connection. I'm thinking if everyone at Eden Park was an atom that came together to tell a story of Aotearoa football fandom, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't. It's sort of like a thing that's quite an evocative idea to me, because it captures on something I think about, but I don't quite have haven't quite like formulated it into a concise sentence. But I think because the universe is made of atoms, right? Like it's things are made up of atoms. That's what they're built from. But the building blocks aren't the thing. Like that's just the material, the thing that gives it life. Like, you imagine, this is probably there's probably a better version than this that I can think of. But if you think of like the Frankenstein movie, where they, which I don't believe this is how they did it in the book, but in the movie, the thing of like putting the body parts together to create a human life somehow, and then waiting for a lightning storm, and then the lightning storm hits, and that gives you enough energy to, I don't know, like the body parts of the atoms, the lightning bolt that gives it life are the stories. Like the context that we live our lives in is not about the physical aspects of just like, or even the chemical aspects of what makes life. It's the living that is the thing. It's the stories, the context that we live in, like the things we get up to. We don't define them by like chemical formulas. We define them by experiences, and that's where the stories come in. It's like the stories that sustain us ultimately.
Your mana is just stories, right? Like
pretty much,
that is how you build your mana, is what you experience and the stories that are told around those experiences. So fabulous. Good mindfulness. Great start to the variety show Wildcard. Let's crack into some sporting anecdotes here. We start off with the leading segment, the sizzling banger. What do you got?
Yeah, so the All Whites did lose to Australia. They lost twice to Australia, in fact, which is at least once more than I was hoping they would. So we won't see them again for 6 months, because there are no games planned for the November window around the World Cup. And then there actually isn't another FIFA window until March after that. So that's 6 months' time if they play. They're actually only missing one window, but it's a big window, and it's a frustrating one to lose some momentum there. But over that course of time, while they're going to be absent, Danny Hayes' coaching contract actually runs up, because he's only contracted through to the end of the World Cup. If he had gotten a big result, or a couple of big results this year, beaten Costa Rica and qualified for the World Cup, or even beaten Australia in one of these games, I think he'd be in a pretty good place to where no one would be questioning really him continuing on as coach. But he didn't. And now it's a conversation that we sort of have to have, is does he stay or does he go? So, it's whipping up the pros and cons here. The case for Danny Hayes to remain as coach, I think he steadied the All Whites program coming out of the pandemic. He made them into a serious team again, which the best players actually want to be a part of. Extremely big tick in his favor there. The style of footy's been impressive, like positive build-up play, exciting players given room to express themselves. That's been fun. He is a Kiwi coach. He is well respected by the team. He understands the culture. Speaking of mana, he always uses the word mana every single interview. He always talks about mana, which is it's good. No other coach in the world is going to do. You bring an English coach over to coach the team, as has been done in the past, they're not going to be speaking in Te Reo words, And also, I just don't know. There's a heap of alternatives outside of relatively expensive foreigners. And the other thing in his favor is that while the results weren't there, he didn't exactly have an abundance of time to get them ready for 2022. He pretty much had to cram an entire World Cup cycle into 1 year. And clearly that's not enough, especially with a young team trying to accustomize themselves to the international level. However, the case against Danny Hay, this team hasn't scored a goal in 5 games. They lost 4 of those games. Peru, Costa Rica, 2 against Australia. It is a results-based business, football, and he hasn't gotten any, not against the big teams, not against in the most important games. That lack of goals as well, it hasn't necessarily come about from wasted chances, like just player errors or bad luck or whatever, or even good defending. It's to be honest, the lack of decent opportunities that they're not carving out during games, and that stems perhaps from not having the right systems or patterns in play to be able to like do those things. And while there aren't an abundance of alternatives, as I said, Danny Hay himself was hired from out of the National League after winning the Premiership, as it was back then, with Eastern Suburbs. There are folks out there who have similar pedigrees to what he has right now. I'm thinking like, Jose Figueroa or Scotty Hales or whatever, even a Darren Baisley or someone like that. Might want to see what Ramon Triboulier is up to these days. Last I heard, he was in Russia, which is probably not the best place to be at the moment. Des Buckingham might even come back if you ask nicely enough. So there are some alternatives. I'm not saying one way or another. Danny Hay stay, Danny Hay go. I'd probably lean towards continuity at this point and say whatever. But I do think it's a conversation to be had, and that's just me laying out the pros and cons, the upsides and the downsides, and the various situations. They're going to have a little bit of a Cordeiro with New Zealand football later on, I think in October, after they've done their World Cup cycle review, and that's when everything will be figured out there.
Is Danny Hay more of a David Kidwell or Michael Maguire?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah,
I'm hoping for everyone's sake he's a bit more like Michael Maguire, Kiwis coach wildcard. But
he probably is.
Your pause
he looks
didn't
more like
me.
Michael Maguire.
Your pause didn't fill me with a lot of confidence. My sizzling banger to start us off here, wildcard. I just want to share one moment. This was a moment at the All Whites game that gave me the most goosebumps, and it wasn't even during the game. As the players ran out on the field, Bill Tuiloma, playing right back, runs over to his corner of the field in the first half, and it's like Eden Park, that little corner, it was just Bill Tuiloma and the Auckland fans. And he rocked them up, he'd like swinging the arms, yeah, let's go. And then the fans were ruckus in their response to Bill Tuiloma, hometown Uso from Auckland, Bill Tuiloma, national football player, doing big things. And I was thinking, Bill Tuiloma is probably my favorite All Whites player, just the connection to Auckland, being a Samoan from Auckland, one of the best footballers from Aotearoa ever. And he got that moment where it was just him and the crowd. Everyone else was dapping each other up further away, and then Bill Tuiloma sprints over to his corner, does a little lap, racks up the crowd. They give it back to him. Plenty of shared connection between Tuiloma and his local fans, and it was special, and it gave me goosebumps. And then I got drunk. Vitamin statistics here, wildcard. What are you going to enlighten us? We'll have to wiggle through these quite quickly because we have ranted our way through the top of the show.
Yeah, well, this one won't take too long because I want to talk about some Joseph Parker stats from his fight against Joe Joyce on the weekend. And that fight didn't go the full distance, so I don't see why the stats should. Yeah, fella may or may not have heard, kind of got knocked all the way out by Joe Joyce on the weekend. Not ideal. Okay, it's boxing, that can happen. One punch can do a lot of damage, especially late in a fight when fatigue sets in, defenses are down, arms are heavy, not quite got your guard up, whatever. But the thing is, Parker was kind of getting wasted on the cards already, like even before he got dropped. So going by the CompuBox stats, they had Joyce throwing 844 total punches at an accuracy of 36%. Parker, in comparison, only 566 total punch attempts at an accuracy of 26%. Parker only landed 23 out of his 305 jabs. That's 8%. Normally, when you're seeing Parker doing well, his jab is where it all stems from. Like, that's how he establishes himself in a fight. Pretty obviously didn't do that if you're only hitting 23 out of 305. He was much better with his power punches. And maybe that's an Andy Lee thing. Like, I think he hit 48% of them on target. That's the one for his power punches. But unfortunately, Joe Joyce withstood all of it. Didn't look damaged. And then absolutely went to town on Parker from about the 5th round onwards. And this round 6 to 8, he landed 40 plus, like landed at 40 plus punches in total in every single one of those rounds. No Parker opponent, and this includes, the guys who've beaten him in the past, Anthony Joshua, Dillian White. No Parker opponent has ever landed more than the 202 power punches that Joyce delivered to him. I hate to say it, but these numbers kind of read like a lunchtime school hiding.
Seen a couple of them, and don't think Joseph Parker would be on the receiving end of those. Definitely when he wasn't, I think he went to Marcellin College in Auckland. I don't think he would have been on the receiving end of too many schoolyard hidings at school in Auckland. My stat here, wildcard, shout out Amelia Kerr. She was the leading run scorer for the White Ferns in their ODI series against the West Indies. Scored the most runs. And There is a statistical story here with Amelia Kerr in ODI cricket that is really important because it frames who Amelia Kerr is as a cricketer. This year in ODI batting, she is averaging 59.27, 1 century, 4 half centuries, 652 runs. This is her second year in a row averaging over 30, and the first time in her career that she has a 50-plus score in consecutive years of ODI batting. That puts Amelia Kerr among the best batters in the world. Like, ODI cricket, 15 games, averaging 59. You're one of the world's best ODI batters right now this year. Amelia Kerr's bowling. She has averaged over 30 as an ODI bowler for 3 consecutive years. The year before that, she averaged 29.87. And her first 3 years of ODI bowling, Amelia Kerr averaged 20, 21, and 19. So 3 years below averaging 22, and then 29.87, and then 3 years above 30. So Amelia Kerr right now might be a better batter than she is a bowler in ODI cricket. At the very least, she is a certified international ODI all-rounder and one of the best cricketers in the world. But her batting has made the most development in recent years. She came out of the gate swinging as a leggy, dominating international cricket with her leg spin bowling. She's hit a bit of a plateau there while her batting has continued to develop. So we'll just keep an eye on that. But at the moment, I just want to say Amelia Kerr the batter, like, we know Amelia Kerr is the leggy, but right now she is an absolutely monster batter and a certified all-rounder.
How old is Amelia Kerr?
Let me check. 23.
22, 23?
21, sorry.
21, damn.
23 was
So
definitely
basically,
a guess.
what you're saying is Amelia Kerr, by age 21, has done what it took Daniel Vettori until at least 30 to be able to do, which is like become a genuine batter and also a bowler who everyone respects enough that they just don't get out to you. Because she still has a really good RPO. She's just not taking wickets. And it sort of feels like she's basically become Daniel Vettori for the White Ferns, isn't she? Only a better batter because she's averaging 50 plus this year and batting at threes. So.
Amelia Kerr was the only bowler to concede less than 3 RPO in the ODI series. She took 1 wicket and an average of 67, RPO of 2.48. So correct in your assessment, Wildcard. Deep in the mangroves. What do you got?
I got some quick fire Stephen Adams Media Day reactions because Media Day was this very morning, and I was spending most of it polishing off my National Women's League Round 2 review, but did manage to catch his official sort of little press conference thing that he did, 5-10 minutes of just sitting there in front of the media. So a couple reactions just off the cuff. I'll write about this in more detail later in the week. But first off, they asked how he was, and he said he was still above ground. So that's always a good way to start, as one of his trademark cliches. He was asked also about, because Jaren Jackson Jr. is injured right now. So he was asked about who he's going to be starting next to him at the power forward position. And first thing he said was like, well, are we sure I'm starting? Like, did the coach say that or anything like that? He sort of chucked it out there. I've got to earn my place, same as everyone else. Obviously, he did get benched for a little while during the playoffs. He wasn't wanting to make that assumption, but the media were all very happy to have already made that assumption. So I think maybe their opinion is a bit more of a giveaway compared to his standard humility. I would assume that means Stephen Adams starting center, nothing to worry about there. And because Jaren Jackson Jr. is injured as well, that does tell you that, like, because I heard the coach at one point, Taylor Jenkins, saying something about how he picks his lineups and how he's going to combat the lack of Jaren Jackson Jr. for the start of the season. And he's like, well, we've got a lot of good options, blah, 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 all the standard coach things that they say. But he said it all starts with defensive presence. We get that, and then we build on to like shot making, spacing, and how the offense is supposed to run, all these kind of things. But first of all, defensive presence. Well, that's Stephen Adams. And if Jaren Jackson Jr. isn't there, there's absolutely no question that Stephen Adams needs to be starting because he's their next best big man defender. And those two together are absolutely like lockdown. One of them with someone else is still essential. Like that's no one's gonna argue with that. He also said he spent the off season. Well, he said he's working on the old body, mate, trying to get the old six pack, which is still apparently non-existent. So he says, but as he was pressed a little bit further than that, asked about like some of the videos that come out every single year. Like I got to stress this is the first year that he's been with Memphis for a full off season. So the Memphis media are only just getting aboard this thing. If you follow Steven Adams from the start of his career, basically every single year, there is a video clip by some coach he's working with in the off season of him shooting a bunch of 3-pointers. Every single year, in particular, it's really ramped up the last 4 years, probably. There was another one of those the other week, like just him drilling threes. And they asked him about that. He said, don't expect it. Like, don't expect me to start doing this. But if it does happen, be surprised and cheer him on. So I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to take his thing. He also asked him what he got up to back in the home country in the motherland during the off season. He said he spent his time in Aotearoa fishing, seeing family, working on the farm, which sounds like an ideal off season lifestyle to me. Also asked about like the team situation after they made a bit of a playoff run, young team. He was sort of like him and Kyle Anderson were the two guys who had a couple playoff runs before, sort of knew what they were doing there. Basically, no one else in that Grizzlies team had played more than like half a dozen playoff games. He did say that makes a big difference. Like the playoff experience is not something you can prepare for. It's not something you can simulate. You have to have done it. And that's the only way you're going to know what it's like. So that's a big difference for them. Also said, though, not too worried about outside expectations about the Grizzlies, taking the next step or challenging for a title this year or anything like that. He said, don't really care about what anyone outside the team says. And basically, every time you start a new season, you got to be open-minded because you never know what to expect. Different teams emerge, different players' injuries happen, different rules. He mentioned like sometimes the refs just officiate something different, and that can have a big domino effect. So, yeah, there's lots of good chat from Steven Adams coming into the start of the season. And the media day is always nice because it's the symbolic. The new NBA season is upon us. Here we go. Like, get ready for this kind of moment. And especially for Steven Adams, because, anytime you put that dude in front of a microphone, it's box office stuff. And didn't disappoint this morning either.
Deep in my Mangroves wildcard, we are in Rugby League Swampland. We've gone deep and we've made our way to grand final weekend. I just want to throw up a couple of ideas early in the week that I'm pondering. And we'll do a big old grand final preview in the niche cast on Thursday. But early in the week, I can't get over this Northland factor in the grand final. James Fisher-Harris from the Hokianga region. I think he's Kohu on the western side of the northern tip of the North Island. Coming up against Dylan Brown. Whangarei's Dylan Brown for the Parramatta Eels. Dylan Brown was pretty good for the Eels. The Eels struggled in that first half against the Cowboys, and then everyone elevated their games in the second half. So I was kind of wrong in my Dylan Brown top 2 player assessment because the Eels, everyone was pretty good in the second half. And that was really impressive from the Eels because they've stumbled at those big games before and they came out pretty lackluster in the first half, but then they got back on track in the second half. Dylan Brown was running a lot in the second half. Part of some really good shape with Sean Lane as well and made a bunch of tackles, which is what he does best. James Fisher-Harris was just, usual mahi for him against the Rabbitohs. Both are from Northland, and I'm thinking James Fisher-Harris definitely is one of the best pieces of Kiwi-NRL recruitment right now. Because James Fisher-Harris wasn't a highly decorated prospect. It's one thing for the Broncos to sign Jordan Ricky. It's one thing for the Sydney Roosters to get Christian Tuipulotu. They signed him away from the Warriors. And those type of signings and bits of recruitment are good. They're fun. But these players are in every single rep team. They're showcasing their talent for every age group level, schoolboy tournaments in Aotearoa. Everyone can see the talent. James Fisher-Harris, and I'm pondering this with Dylan Brown as well, they weren't making all sorts of rep teams. and that seems like a massive part of this equation. The Panthers recruited James Fisher-Harris from Northland without much buzz, and he is chasing back-to-back championships for the best team in rugby league, which seems like a great piece of Kiwi-NRL recruitment. Both were pretty successful since moving to Sydney to join the Eels and the Panthers, respectively. Dylan Brown, he was playing under 15s for Northern Swords alongside Paul Turner, moves to the Eels, wins Harold Matthews under 16s. Next year, wins SG Ball under 18s. And then within a couple of years, Dylan Brown was making his NRL debut as an 18-year-old, couple years after winning the under-18 championship. So you do the math there. Dylan Brown was an absolute gun as soon as he went to the Eels, and both these bits of Kiwi NRL recruitment have been super successful with really crisp scouting and recruitment. Like, you got to get into the back blocks of Aotearoa to find these lads and what they're up to, and they are both, good characters, winners, and incredibly successful Kiwi NRL players. So big up to them. This Northland narrative is huge for this grand final. Also, shout out Gayle Broughton from Hawera. She is the Eels fullback in NRLW, and I don't think she's going to be available for the Kiwi Ferns. She kind of ruled herself out just with inexperience in the rugby league. Eels lost their first 4 games. Then they defeated Broncos in the last game of regular season for this NRLW season. They knocked the Broncos out, and then they upset the Roosters last weekend, and the Roosters were undefeated in regular season. So the Eels qualified for semi-finals with 1 win, and then they defeated the defending champions who hadn't lost a game, and that Eels team has Gayle Broughton at fullback. First year of NRLW, and she is averaging 131 running meters per game. Not doing a whole lot of playmaking, as some NRL fullbacks do, but Gayle Broughton has definitely shined with her running game that translated nicely from 7. So hopefully Gayle Broughton and the Eels can get up over, I think they're playing the Knights. Good week for the Eels. Gayle Broughton and NRLW. Dylan Brown, Isaiah Papali'i, Maratini Okore, maybe Makatoa as well for the Eels NRL Grand Final. Big Northland yarns as well. So shout out Northland Sport. Question time here, Wildcard. Let's roll through these hard and fast. I would just want the name. Who is the next up All Whites player who will emerge into the All Whites team when we next see them play?
Well, I had to rack my brain for this because I think the reason for that is the main answer is that we don't know. Like, it's someone like Alex Grieve came out of the blue to get where he was. You don't know which players are going to pop up in the January transfer window after the World Cup, transfers, whatever. Don't know who that's going to be. Like, there's not always a rhyme or reason with those things. Or if there is, there's a selection pool of like 30 players I could name. But I think in light of Winston Reid retiring, a little bit of a gap in the squad at centre back perhaps now. I'm curious how Finn Sermon goes for the Phoenix this year, because if he starts pushing, like, he's probably their 4th choice or 3rd, the backup centre back basically for them. He's going to be on the bench. If someone gets injured and he starts playing a bunch of games and he plays really well, he could crack that thing. The other one I would say is Sam Sutton. I think Sam Sutton, also from the Phoenix, very close already. I'm a little bit surprised he actually didn't make this squad, considering Paulson and Ben Old got in. So some combination of those. I think Sam Sutton's most likely to make it in 6 months because he will be starting for the Phoenix. He will be playing a lot of games. There you go. Question back in return. I won't ask you if the All Whites have a mental block against Australia, so I won't do that. What I will ask you is nice and simple. Who's going to win the NRL Grand Final? Why are they going to win the NRL Grand Final? And who will be the most influential Kiwi player within that victory?
I believe the Panthers will win, and I believe, obviously, there's only one bloke. Shout out Moses Leota and Scott Sorensen, fantastic players, but I think we're all just in James Fisher-Harris, Kohu, Hokianga, Northland, Mana, and Fun fact, James Fisher-Harris is the second most long-standing Panthers player in this team. The only player who made his debut before Fisher-Harris is Isaiah Yeo.
I was just going to guess that.
Nathan Cleary made his debut a few weeks after Fisher-Harris. So when you think Panthers are chasing back-to-back titles, Fisher-Harris's Panthers mana is undisputable. One last question here, wildcard. Joseph Parker. Is this moment in time a springboard to greater things like motivation, bouncing back, or is this the beginning of the end?
I think it might be the beginning of the end, if I'm being honest. I just, after a loss that devastating, it's kind of hard to see people feeling like he's someone they have to go through in order to get to the top. But you know what boxing's like? The end doesn't mean like a couple more fights and then he's done sort of thing. The end might be like a 10-year tale of just being a solid pro, getting sometimes on undercards, not necessarily the main event, but still getting relatively decent fights, just not really getting anywhere close to a title shot again. It feels like maybe that's what we're in. Not so much the end as just like the long plateau, I guess, for Joseph Parker. But yeah, that was bad. But you never know. Like just as quickly as one big punch could end you one way, it can happen the other direction as well. I don't expect it to, but it could. You know, he might big win and then suddenly he's back on the cards. But I think probably the long plateau is the bit to expect.
A long plateau in professional boxing is the end. Like, let's be honest here. Well,
yeah, it is the end, but it's
musical. Like your plateau is just you getting punched in the face. That is not a good plateau. Where you're just
and when you realize you're in that state, what's the motivation to keep going as well? Like
exactly.
You know.
Musical Jam Wildcard. We got a new album from No Cigar, Aotearoa band. They got a new album, Bienvenido. Good bit of guitar music, excitable guitar music, moments of ruckus, moments of mellowness as well, and a good old sing-along, catchy tune from Freddie Gibbs. It's got a new song, Dark Hearted, that you will probably want to hum along to. Your Musical Jam Wildcard.
Or you can also sing along and hum along to the new Troy Kingi song as well. First single off his new album, which is sort of like an 80s style, bit more synthy sounds, at least what he said. First single backs that up, but it's hard to get a gauge on the first single from watching the video because you don't even hear the song. You're just like watching this crazy video where he's like reenacting all these famous 80s movies. Like he's doing a Back to the Future and just The Shining at one point and E.T. and Ghostbusters, all these things. It's an unreal music video. Like it's so good. It's like funny and also catchy. And it's a cool tune. So I'm excited for what that comes next because basically Troy Kingi is so much like you know, he's got stocks. He hasn't failed yet, so there's nothing to be worried about there. I like the new Charlie Crockett album as well. That one's pretty cool. Molly Lewis is a professional whistler who's got an album which is way deeper than you'd expect for a professional whistler. But yeah, you sort of have to hear it to understand what I'm going about. But that one's cool as it's like very exotic and you know, what a whistler should be doing. It's cool. It's a good album, but yeah, I can't describe it in adequate words.
Maybe she can come up with some all whites football tunes for the
that's not a bad shout out, although she is half Australian, so we'll have to put it on Troy Kingi. He can do it.
Yeah, he's probably better suited. That is the Niche Case Variety Show. We'll be back on Thursday with another episode of the Niche Cast. Big it up to yourself. Raise your mana, kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Chur.